Hello everyone, I'm Sequence 6, and this is the production walkthrough for my latest single, Sai Kung, which is part of the Future Sound EP Volume 20 on FSOE. I'm really honored to be part of the label, and I'm excited to show you all the makings of this track today. So before we do that, I want to just play a little bit of the song in case you've never heard it before. So let's do that. So you can hear it's a really filled out song, but it's actually quite simple. One of the most important things in making trance music is making sure that your kick and bass is going to hold up to the modern standard, really. So we're going to start with that. I've just soloed only the kick and bass lines right here, and I'm just going to show you what they sound like together. It's a super, super simple pattern. And the most important part about that is actually not these mid basses here. It's the offbeat sub bass and the relationship that it has with the kick. So, I have my kick in audio here. I like to be able to see the actual waveform of the kick drum. But my sub bass is in MIDI because there's, bass changes throughout the track. And, I usually don't work with audio for sub basses. I know some producers do, but that's just not my thing. So, if I just simply show you the pattern, it is literally only on the offbeat. This track is in G, so the root note is G. And so the intro, it's only that one note, and literally the pattern, that's all it is. But it's all about the processing and the volume difference between your kick and sub. So if I even just as simple as turn off the EQs on the sub, it sounds like this. And that does not sound so pleasant. So all that I did was roll off all the top end, and I also cut the lowest lows at 25 hertz. You can see that there. And then the next EQ, I boosted at 100 hertz and also dipped at 250, because 250, there's a lot of mud there. Even if I turn that one off, you'll hear a difference. It's a little bit less gelled with the kick. And then for the kick drum itself, if I turn off the processing on that, it's probably going to sound better than the processing being off on the kick. Yeah, it just really just needed some high end, so all I did was boost here at a little over 4,000 hertz, a little over 6 dB, and then a little boost around 290, roll off at 40. This other EQ is just doing the automation on the low end of the kick, because every time that I do a kick roll, I don't want all those low frequencies in there. It'll muddy everything up. And a quick tip on doing kick rolls, actually, before we move into anything else, because I love to do kick rolls as a build up like this. Always automate your low end so that you take it out as it's rolling, because you'll get a bunch of mud if you don't. And then at the same time, turn down the volume slightly on the automation. Just bring the volume down a little bit, or else this is still going to sound louder than when your kick kicks back in. If we move on to the mid basses, really, really simple. We have, I think, only 2 layers. It might be 3. Let's see. I have this layer. It's really, really simple. This is the EQ. I want to do a mid-side kind of EQ here. I felt that the mids were not quite cutting through as much as I wanted, so I boosted those there. Boosted the highs in stereo. Then a stereo enhancer is a great little plug-in. Just really stereo separating this, because without it, it sounds a little dull. Just needs that width. And then this side chain, I'm using Grossbeat for that. It comes with FL Studio, and it's just volume, really. And then we have our second layer. This one has a pretty heavy EQ. I was taking out some resonant frequencies. Without it, it sounds like this. You can hear that ringing. It's not pleasant. So you just find those frequencies, dip them down. Don't be afraid to dip them super, super harsh. This is minus 30 dB at 986.99 hertz. It's necessary. And you'll notice if it's your own track, you'll start obsessing over those frequencies usually. At least I do. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it sounded as clear as possible. So, then I think I sent those to a bus. I did, yes. And on that, there's another side chain. This is a really, really heavy side chain. And then another EQ that was just kind of shaping things. These bits are muted. I sometimes try EQs out and then, they don't necessarily work. So I turn them off. Then here we have this plugin is really a secret magic trick in a lot of my productions. I use this in Holding On, which was released on Find Your Harmony. The track did pretty well, and if it wasn't for this plugin, the Abbey Roads TG mastering chain, the track wouldn't sound like it does. And it's the same for this song, although there's some other secret elements that I'll show you later on. This plugin is really magical, and it just brings a lot of life to a lot of sounds. So if we just listen to this bass line all together, and I turn this off, it has a totally different tone. So if I turn it back on, you can hear it's way brighter, but it's also a little bit wider because of this spreader, stereo spreader here. It's got this limiter built in. It's really great, and you can change the mix knob here. It's only at 28.2%, but it makes a difference. And I really love that. Then I actually put another limiter on this because, I just wanted to keep everything in check. I like limiters over compressors usually when it comes to mid basses because compressors can really thin things out. At least that's how it's been for me. And I don't really want to do that. I want to keep my sound as intact as humanly possible, and compressors just add too much color oftentimes to my mid basses for my liking. I like to do most of the work with EQ. But anyway, we'll move on to the elements that work really well with those sounds, which is my acid lines. Such a cool sound. I actually don't know where. Oh, this is coming from here. It was originally from the Sean Tyas pack, but then I actually changed the acid like halfway through making this track because I just didn't really feel like it fit. I just never changed the name. And this is, what is this patch? I don't know why it's not loading. It's a sequence thing called Divine Design. I think it's from Protonica. I really love his stuff. Really talented psytrance producer, and he makes some great simple packs. And on this, I really didn't need to do much. I just dipped at 250, just tiny bit, rolled off the low end, I always do, and then this crazy preset from FabFilter Saturn that's really doing a lot on the sound. If I turn it off, you'll hear verses with it on. It's just adding that grit on the top end that's just so necessary for this acid to cut through. I really, really love that plugin as well. Super simple. The next acid comes in at bar 49. Really, really cool sound. Also Saturn on that. Pretty hefty EQ setting here. A major delay. And then the ozone maximizer actually on this to make sure that it all stays relatively the same volume. Then I've sent it to the acid bus here, which has another EQ to sort of shape both sounds at once. LFO tool doing a side chain, and then the acid bus is sent to a parallel compression, and then we have, actually on the individual acids sent to a delay send. The other one is sent to the parallel compression again, just to beef it up a little bit more. And then we have an extra bass line, I've called it. I don't really remember what this is. Let's see. That is, in fact, an extra bass line. Where did I get this from? This is a sequence called Dyke Pike, I guess, like Paul Van Dyke Pluck, I think. I don't know, but it's a great sound, and I used it. It's a nice sequence. It really pairs well with the bass, pairs well with the acids. So yeah, I mean, that's really all there is to it. And then if we move on to the other sounds that really make this track what it is, this fill is just spectacular right here. I chopped this up a little bit. And there is a ton of delay on that. It's sent to this delay send, which is really simple. Just a delay plugin, ping-ponged, lows cut, 250 dip again. Really, really simple stuff. It's just all these little tiny effects here. And there's not even many of them. There's only 3. Sent to the same delay send. They just fill out space. There's another one back here. What is this one? I think that one only appears a couple times. But there's really no other major effects in the track. We have a really nice clap, which has Saturn on it. Fair amount of drive, EQ, really simple. Really just pushing the highs out. A couple percussions. Just a few simple loops. Really important offbeat hi-hat. Gotta have one of those. Or a ride. It may actually be a ride. It is a ride. Sounds really, really good. We do have a snare roll in here, even though I did my kick rolls. And a couple reverse crashes and crashes. Super simple stuff here. There's some EQ on one of them, just taking out some of those frequencies in the high mids that I don't really like. And it's probably doing the same thing on this one. Yeah, it's the exact same EQ. I just copied it over. We have some impacts in here somewhere, if I can find them. There we go. All those low frequencies that you need when your kick is gone. That didn't get any processing at all. And, you know, that's those little parts of the track. Then we have a piano. This has the linear phase multiband compressor on it. And if I turn that off, you hear a major difference. I think it's this EQ, though, that makes the biggest difference. There's so much high-end pushed into that. And a dip at 250 again, a roll-off on the lows. And then it's pushing that into an SSL compressor, which, you know, you'll see that doing a lot of work here if I rewind. See that moving. The ratio of 4:1. And, yeah, it's still pretty simple stuff. But the piano on its own doesn't sound that exciting. There's this pluck that has to go along with it, which also on its own doesn't sound that exciting. It's even got some like little clicks in it, but I didn't feel like it needed to change. And I EQ'd out of the highs, EQ'd out of the lows. Sent it to a linear phase multiband again because I love that plugin. You can see it dipping down a little bit. This one's doing more work than the last one did. And a Valhalla Vintage Verb. Now, the thing is that both of these sounds work in coordination with each other to create this riff. They're like a call and response, and they remind me of the land meeting the ocean and the view of that from one of the hiking trails in Saikang that I did a few years ago. And that really brought the track to life. So, you know, they're really important to work together. So you don't always have to choose like one sound for your counterpluck, for example. A lot of people, that's what they call it for the melodies that play over top of your leads. Maybe choose 2 sounds, have them interact with each other like this. It's really fun. And it just adds a lot of personality to the track that you wouldn't get if you just use a piano or just used a pluck. They play off of each other so well because they have contrast. And that's really, really important. So those two things work well together. And then we have these pads. A sub pad's really simple. You know, I just wanted to make sure there was some extra low end. This EQ, if I turn it off, you'll hear it sounds a little dull. It needs more low end, so that's what all these boosts are for. An ozone imager where I made all the frequencies below 140 completely mono. Then just to make it sound gradual and not abrupt, I did another frequency band here that is from 140 to about 300, where it's at minus 60 mono. So 40% of it's still stereo, but 60% of it's not. And then 60% upward is expanding it outward, more stereo from the 320 something hertz upwards, just to give it that texture to blend well with the other pads, which have some really beautiful tones up here. There are 3 of them, in addition to this sub pad. This one is super, super calm. It's almost a pluck. Comes from Spire. And I just did some EQ shaping. Nothing major. Sent it to the pad bus. The next one is the really, really, really full one. No processing on that individual channel. The high pad has no processing on that individual channel. Then we're back to the sub pad, but the actual pad bus that the sub pad is not sent to, only the other pads, has a sidechain that gets turned on when the kit comes in. An EQ just shaping things again, adding some more highs in, adding some 700-ish frequency in. Another ARTG mastering chain, just keeping things in check, adding some nice tones. I'll show it to you without any of this processing, just so that you can hear what it sounds like. And then with it, it's this. It's more subtle, but it's sort of by way of increasing volume by frequency band from this plugin rather than increasing volume by fader gain. And so, you know, sometimes I just want that more control. So I'll use a plugin like this where I have all these individual EQs, but it's not quite as much control as something like ProQ. So you get a broader sense of the picture. It's broader brush strokes for your painting. So yeah, then, you know, the thing that really brought this track together was these vocals. I was searching for a while for something that really I felt represented the overwhelming feeling of seeing and experiencing what Saikang is, you know, the magnitude of the beauty and the intensity of it, while it's still feeling so calming and inviting and welcoming. And then I found this vocal on Splice, and I use Splice all the time. It's just so incredible. And so I went ahead and I manipulated a little bit. You can see all these little fades. I think I might have changed the pitch on one of them. Yeah, it's on this last little bit here. Yeah, I put it down 200 cents because I wanted to change the notes. But on their own, they sound like this. And that just works so well with these pads, you know, it's just incredible. And then with these leads, it's just huge. So if I go ahead and show you the individual parts of the leads, these aren't chords. Even if they sound like it, they're super, super, super simple. It's just one note, one note, one note, one note. There's nothing under this, nothing above it. And the real trick to that is the processing and also how the leads are made up. So this one, It's super dry and it's completely stereo, and it's got a really simple EQ and a limiter that I don't think really ended up doing anything. But I had it there for some reason and I didn't turn it off. So must be doing something. Then we have this gorgeous pluck, which I wanted to boost these frequencies in the, 2000s range. A linear phase multiband, just keeping it in check. If I turn this off, you can hear it sounds really dull. But that sounds a little harsh. So this brings life to it while compressing these high frequencies. And then we have our main lead, which is insane. There's so much air in this. The EQ is incredibly simple. It's just this roll off 36 dB per octave, 127 hertz. And then we have this truly is like a sound design tool in this scenario. I was just messing around with this plugin. I literally just purchased it, I think, the day before I started this track. And I was like, well, I got to figure out like what I can do that's just like a little bit crazy with this plugin. Because, it's used as a mastering plugin. And anytime I buy a mastering plugin, I'm like, I'm not using this for mastering. I'm going to use this for something else because I want to be creative. And this just worked so incredibly well. I was using these bands. I was messing around with them. And I mean, what is this boost at? Let's see. It's so high. 18 dB. and you can see, this is just, it's working its magic on everything. Compressing and bringing life to the sound. Without it, that doesn't even sound good, but with it, it's just amazing. And so then all of these leads are sent back to this bus, which has a really mild sidechain on it, a really mild EQ. I went about all of these resonant frequencies, and honestly, none of the dips worked. So I just turned them all off, but I left them there just in case anything jumped out later on in the mix. But I never even went back to the song for a mix. It just kind of mixed itself. But there's a little boost here only on the mid band. Without that, you can hear... It sounds nice, but it just needed this boost. Just adds a little bit of warmth to, make up for the intense high end that this has. There's also a roll off here. I didn't want it too harsh. You can hear, if you listen really closely up here, that's really bright. That you can still hear the brightness, but it's rolled off a touch. And I just felt that was a really important thing to make sure of, that it wasn't too harsh on anybody's ears, because on these big sound systems, all the flaws will either come out or they'll disappear. And to be honest, it just really depends on the environment. So you don't want to be like, oh, this is just going to be masked by, the fact that it's in a, club with a great sound engineer that's always going to be making sure that this is hitting the right compressors or whatever. You want to make sure that your song is going to translate to Apple earbuds, to a system at Avalon Hollywood or Luminosity or wherever the song has a potential of being played. You want to make sure it sounds as good as possible. And so these little details, noticing that it's a little bit high up here, rolling that off, it's always really important. So honestly, I'm pretty sure I covered every single thing in the song. At this point, the only other thing to cover is the mastering. As you can see, there's a fruity limiter down here that's off. I never use that for mastering. If you use FL Studio, I wouldn't recommend it. It works for other things, but, buy a different limiter. Invisible limiter is probably the best, but I didn't have it when I wrote this. And so I used the Ozone 9 Maximizer. I love this company. iZotope is incredible. I would recommend Ozone 9, which is, I think, now like Ozone 12 or something, but I've never updated it. You don't really need to once you buy it once, unless they do some magnificent upgrades. Whatever version you have is enough, but the Maximizer plugin is my go-to for any limiting that I do, unless I'm using Invisible Limiter now. But I still go back to this like 60% of the time, and literally the entire master chain is just a roll off at 32 hertz, 36 dB per octave, and the Ozone Maximizer. It is the simplest thing ever. And that's because of something that I think is really important that I've actually talked to a lot of producers about. Some of them are really against it and some of them are really for it. And that's making your song, once you get to a certain point, wherever you feel comfortable, put a limiter on your master. And when you start mixing into the limiter, problems will actually appear a little bit more apparent to your ears. And it's going to be easier to mix your track, because if you send it out to a mastering engineer anyway, they're going to end up putting a limiter on it. And in the modern day, you want things pretty loud, to compete with other tracks. It's, some people call it the loudness war, but ultimately, this track got really loud really easy. And it's really just because I put this limiter on it when it was maybe 40% of the way through the production and writing process, because I wanted to see, where this was going to end up when it was mastered. And by the end result, I was like, I don't need to send this to mastering, and I don't really need to do much of anything. I messed with the character on this a little bit. 55 just sounded best. Minus 5.2 dB just sounded best. I didn't even turn on True Peak to prevent clipping in the analog domain. It says I didn't really pay attention to any of this. I just did what sounded good. And, I think that that's really the beauty of being a musician, being an artist, is that, even if something isn't necessarily what somebody else does or isn't necessarily right, just do it. And if it sounds good, why not? This landed on FSOE and it got played at Dream State. It got played at Avalon. It's gotten played in many places. And I feel incredibly grateful, for that. And it's all, the track came from just making things based off of feeling and really listening to my intuition. So, it's a really simple mastering chain. If I turn it off, really the only thing, I should probably do the gain match. You can see it's going into the red, but if I turn it down so it doesn't clip. It really sounds exactly the same. So, my track sounded beautiful without any mastering, so I wanted the master to be as minimal as possible. So I just used this, and really that's all that this track has. There's nothing else to it. It's super simple. Total of 39 channels, excluding automation. And just keep your track simple. Decide on a theme. Add things intentionally. Really feel into it, and you'll come out with a really good result. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to FSOE for having me on the label. And follow me on all my socials. I'm at Sequence6 Music on all platforms. Thank you again for watching, and thank you to FSOE for releasing this song. Sending love to you all. Have a good day.